I think it's interesting then if you look at the long-term care, and I've talked with Charles before in terms of especially with the changes coming in Medicare reimbursement and things like that, if you can maybe take us through how that world is likely to change with the legislation.
Well, again, collaboration among providers is going to be the key for that. And then it's going to be the quality of the services that are delivered by those providers that help to manage the system. With bundling of payment, our payments, for instance, will probably come to somebody else. And so the viability of our company will be based on the quality of services that we're able to provide to keep those patients from bouncing back to the hospital. So we'll become a key player in that whole collaboration process.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, you said before this is kind of a huge experiment in the unintended law of unintended consequences. What do you expect those may be? What are your concerns as to what may have been, the ball got rolling here, what may be thrown off from
it? We're talking about trying to modify individual behavior and how important that is. In the process, we want to bring affordable health care to more Americans, clearly, but we want to do this in a cost-effective way. We want to do this in a way that still supports the entrepreneurial growth of businesses, and I'm concerned about that. There's clearly a tax overlay on us as individuals and us as businesses. And
that's where I'm really concerned. I think I'm most concerned about the small businesses, to be perfectly frank, than the larger ones. And Jack's kind of referenced the cost shifting that is occurring and will continue to occur. I just want to make sure we end up in a place at the end of the day where we have better health care for Americans. It is affordable, and we just don't get ourselves into a bind. We don't turn into some other countries around the world that do not have the same level or quality of health care that we Americans enjoy today. I don't want to be in a place where, Jack says who rates us, 37 or something? They may, but I'll tell you what, if I need care, I'm going to get it right here in America. No doubt about that. And I hope it ends up okay at the end of the day. And on the positive side, these guys are talking about electronic health records, more integrated view of the physicians for patients. And what struck me in their conversation, which was very positive and good, but it was all based on the local level. How do we take that to the national level? Because employees move around. I mean, we move employees from location A to location B. And how do we ensure that the physician population, the hospitals, get a view of those patients so they can give them the best health care possible?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of money in the stimulus package for that. I think around $19 billion to develop electronic health care records. There's a big market out there for you entrepreneurs if you can figure out that problem. GE's trying to figure it out. Microsoft's trying to figure it out. Google's trying to figure it out, and a whole host of other players, consulting firms. It's a big problem, but I think a potential big solution to bringing down healthcare costs. If we could see a holistic view of a patient throughout the life cycle, throughout their life, really.
Yeah, actually that's going to come. I mean, it starts with the local stuff, but each state is working on their own health information exchange policies, and once we start populating these things in a meaningful way, then they start linking together. Mm-hmm. It's much easier to link exchange to exchange that's already linked and daisy-chained off, dozens and dozens and dozens of practices and hospitals and other providers. It'll come. It's going to take a long time, but eventually we will get there. Eventually it will be one electronic net.
Yeah, I do agree with you, and that's why there's some countries that claim they have it. You go down to Chile, well, they got 17 million people in that country. It's a lot easier problem to solve than it is here in the U.S. But I do agree with you, Jeff. We will get there, but it's going to take a long time.
It's going to take time.
Yeah.
A couple of you called this insurance reform, not healthcare reform. What was missing from the legislation? What would you have liked to have seen come out? Yeah.
A couple of things that would have been positive, and we've all talked around the issue. Obviously, affordability is critical. So what is the approach to fundamentally making sure that in the future that this is funded correctly and it doesn't create an imbalance somewhere? So that's one part of the equation. A second thing, and Jack alluded to it a little bit earlier, is, you know, in the future, a lot of the uninsured population, they will come into the system. The one thing that is a bit of concern is, you know, are we sure those folks are actually going to choose insurance? They're going to have it, and the quote-unquote mandates are, it's debatable if they're strong enough to incent people into the actually take insurance. And that's important from Jack's perspective because, again, from a funding and any provider, the funding formula, Medicare and uninsured, there are some trade-offs that are part of the legislation. So getting those people into the system and being able to have their care paid for is critical as we go out in the future.
One thing that I think is missing from the bill, and I think Jeff talked about it a little bit earlier with the accountable care organizations, and as we go through the process, one of the unintended consequences clearly is to make this thing work, we're all going to have to figure out how we all work together in the process. But we didn't get relief from what we have. Right now, physicians get paid on a flat fee on a piecemeal basis to a great degree. We get paid more in a global perspective at the hospital. Home care is paid, differently, and that's changed the last few years in long-term care. But if we try to work together, we look over our shoulders because we've got these Stark laws and a variety of other things, and the ability to experiment. Everything is a demonstration project, and if we get rid of the fact that if a hospital and doctors sit down and spend 1,000 hours figuring out how to redesign a care process and we save $20 million, we can't share those savings with the physicians. Very hard to even compensate them for that process. And again, what private business person can come in and give, that works on an hourly basis, can give 20% or 10% of their time to make a change and not be compensated for it? And when you do this, you either do it because it's altruistic, and if you do find a way to share, it takes 3 years to get these projects approved, and when you get them approved, the laws are very tight, and I think it should not be criminal for providers to work together and share results of changes. And I think right now we're dealing with that, and you've got to incent people appropriately. And right now we've got so many laws governing what we can do. It really does hamstring us. So if you're looking at reform, to me that was one thing that was missing out of the bill.